All right, what is up, internet? Welcome to the first episode of nocode.video. My name is Rymar, and in this episode, I'm going to bring you up to speed on what this website's all about, what our goal is inside of the space, and where we hope to be by the end of the year. But don't take any of this for granted and think that this is all about software development, because this story is way bigger than that. And it's about time somebody stepped up to start telling it at scale. So grab your popcorn, throw this thing up full screen, and let's go ahead and send it. Oh. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is that this is not just another Zoom live stream. We do have a Zoom room going on at the moment, and so you can see people inside of the Zoom room. Hey, Zoom, if you guys wave to the crowd. But we're looking at coming at this from a little bit of a different perspective. Most people are coming at this from like an educational or a tutorial standpoint, but my background's in media, storytelling, etc. And so I want to come at the no-code space with a little bit of editorial content, interviews with top makers and creators, and kind of start telling the story of what's going on behind the space. So let's see. The other thing you'll notice, again, we have the live stream going on in concurrently with the Zoom room. So if you'd like to join us, what we're going to be doing is we'll have the Zoom room going for about 20-30 minutes before we go live moving forward. After that, we'll go live. We'll do what we're doing here. And then at the end, we'll jump back in with Q&A or any part of the interactive section. So every episode will have a little bit of pre-prepared content. And, from there, we'll just dive into some interactive stuff. We'll do some builds. We just had Joseph Barry showing us a little preview of his masterclass. So we're excited to share some of that with you in upcoming recordings. But next, I just wanted to share a little bit about who I am and my background real quick before we get any deeper. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I've been experimenting with media and online publishing for about a decade now, mostly as it relates to local media and small business advertising. On a daily basis, I produce videos, I build websites, and I work with businesses on their digital strategy. And I got into the web publishing game, specifically inside of WordPress, about 7 years ago. 2 years ago, I found Webflow and have since started a local Webflow meetup. I'm an official Webflow ambassador, which I'm not really sure what that means other than my friends are tired of hearing me talk about Webflow. And I do a lot of spreading the word, now getting into this no-code community. And I teased it a little bit, but we went out to the no-code conference last year. This is the beginning of where this all starts. And in case you missed it, here's a little sneak peek of what you missed out in San Francisco. Okay, so, switch to your shot. Got to switch back to my camera. Okay, so honestly, I expected to be producing this video a lot sooner than I am. I'm actually at the point where I really thought I'd be releasing this video. I didn't think it'd take me 3 months to get around to editing it. And I've kind of been watching the space to see how it evolves, to see where we want to position ourselves. And we teased a little bit about the content we were coming up with. We did a little montage sequence. I don't know if everybody saw that on Twitter the other day, but the goal here is to start sharing some of those interviews. If you didn't catch that montage, here's a quick little tease of just the interviews that we have coming up.
I'm Ben Tossell, and I'm founder of MakerPad.
Hi, I'm Duncan. I'm the co-founder and designer at MemberStack.
I'm Paolo Stanley. I am a designer at Envision.
My name is Jason Tenen. I am the CEO of FlowPros.
Hey, my name is Ron Segal. Excited about Webflow and the future of no code.
My name is Kaylin Harris.
My name is Natu, and I work with Lottifaz.
I also do illustrations. I write comics. I do a little bit of everything.
It's going to sound kind of meta here, but no code does not mean no code.
It's like free me so that I can do better things than changing the background of a website.
It's not no code versus code. Like, we're all on the same team.
One of my biggest pain points as a product manager is having an idea and not being able to do anything with it, and having to rely on somebody else to build it for me. So that's really what has me excited.
It's a movement or a campaign or what it is, but you can certainly feel it.
You can tell it's the start of something a lot bigger than it currently is.
Okay, so we've got tons of content in the tank. We've got interviews with maybe like 10 or 15 of the top creators that we could get our hands on out at the No Code conference, and we've started interviewing people across the no-code ecosystem virtually. Most recently, we sat down with Joe Krug. We've got a 30-minute interview with him. He's the founder of FinSuite. If you haven't seen his websites, they are spectacular. He does things with the web that you could only dream of as maybe an entry-level designer or somebody coming into the space. And so here, let's take a peek. This is just a snapshot of what it's like, what our interview process is going to look like. If you're interested, if you got a project you want to sit down with us, we'd love to sit and chat with you. Again, here's a sneak peek at what that interview looks like.
My name is Joe Krug. I have been making FinSuite websites for 4 years now. The first 2 years of FinSuite was mostly a learning experience. Very few client projects, kind of locked myself in my room to understand what a website is, how to make a website, and how Webflow makes it easier. You have to work at the level that you want to sell at. So if you're making $5,000 websites and you want to make $10,000 websites, you need to start building $10,000 websites before you sell $10,000 websites. I was building one site on WordPress that had a pretty deep need for CMS. It was a very large blog, lots of categories, lots of plugins, lots of things that needed to happen. And this was all in WordPress. And I remember during the process thinking, why does it work like this? Building that site, I found Webflow. And I jumped into their CMS and I said, okay, this is how you're supposed to build a CMS. The way that we started with the bigger name clients was with HelloSign. That was the big project that really made FinSuite go above and beyond. And after the HelloSign site, we put that big name on our portfolio. More and more and more started coming in. We're working with Intuit now, WeTransfer, a couple of really other important companies that are coming up, and it's just great.
Okay, so one of the reasons I talked earlier about taking so long to release the footage, and I'm getting excited to do some of that now, but like most creators, you get a little bit of imposter syndrome, and you go out to like a place like San Francisco, you find yourself amongst all these amazing designers and talented creators, and maybe you think you don't belong or that you're not supposed to be a part of that group, or maybe the audio quality is not good. But as I sat down and I started looking at some of this, I started kind of getting feedback and insights from some of the people who were at the event. I saw this little clip from Pablo Stanley about practice, and it really made me want to get into just starting to release the content here.
So what is my advice? My advice is boring and obvious, but I think it always works. That's what it is. It just practice. It's all about just like keep creating and keep making stuff and putting it out there. But there's that threshold in the beginning when you're learning a tool or you're starting something or you're learning something new, There's always that threshold before it feels too difficult or you get bored, and then you move on to something else. My advice is just like keep doing it, just a little bit more, and then you're gonna get there, and then you're gonna get excited because I didn't realize I was able to do this.
Okay, so there's Pablo Stanley telling a little bit about practice, and that's exactly what this is. I kind of set a deadline for myself. Our local meetup was canceled, and I said, okay, this is going to be the time I sit down and actually dedicate a little bit of time to putting this content together, to producing and curating some of this, and so here we are. We're each in the no-code space for our own reasons. We all see that this is a solution to some problem that we're facing, to something that we're trying to accomplish. And for me, it's about rewriting some of the rules about how we distribute information online. How do we monetize the people for their intellectual property? I really feel that the way we distribute and monetize online content is broken. And I think we have an opportunity as creators inside of this no-code space to not only rewrite the rules for how we build software, but for how we connect as communities, how we share information, how we build trust online, and how we build these digital experiences that we all live inside of. And as I was thinking about that, it took me back to a presentation I gave a little bit ago that talks about the flawed incentive structures between the new and the old media model. And I thought it was relevant to share some of those thoughts today because it's right in line with what we're trying to do. Differentiation between the two models, right? The existing model versus the future model. Flawed incentive structures, right? Advertising drives the existing machine. Ad dollars is it, right? The only way to get distribution is through paying the machine. Creators do not build long-term value or ownership of their content. They have to give that up to somebody else, right? And so they have to release what makes them them, right? All of the goods that come out of their brain are literally given away to these machines, and the machines are monetizing them, and the individual does not create any value in that relationship. The business does not own the audience, right? So as a business, you're constantly paying for this depreciating asset. You rent depreciating assets, you invest in appreciating assets. An audience should be an appreciating asset. You should want to own that, right? You don't want to rent your audience, but that requires a way bigger investment than paying some advertiser to spread your message. That involves building trust and building real relationships with those people. So that all brings us right back to where we are with building trust, building communities, building audience, and trying to build relationships. And this is just the first step in what we're trying to pull off as part of all of this. Like I said, we're going to start producing these segments on a regular basis. I'll produce the video. We'll publish it all at nocode.video, and then we'll get interactive. What we're going to do now is jump into the Zoom call with the people that we have hanging out. We've got a meetup scheduled. We're going to jump into Webflow. We're going to show you guys a little bit about the platform. We're going to build a little basic website, answer questions. Colleen, could you share the Zoom room in the YouTube so that the people on YouTube could join us in Slack? And while we do that, I'm just going to give us a short little send-off to prepare. All right. What's up, Zoom? We got Zoom in the house. We're live. Can you guys hear me? Oh, we got the delay from the live stream. All right. Can, let's see. Continue. All right. Can everybody kill their YouTube stream at this point if you're going to be joining us in the...
yeah, I can hear you.
Yep. Hey, what's up, man? We're back. All right. So yeah, if what you guys think? Share your thoughts. Give me some feedback. Colleen, how do we do? Are you guys still watching on the live stream or in Zoom here? Oh, that's why. Okay, let me unmute myself in Zoom. Can you guys hear me in the Zoom room now?
Yeah, all good.
All right, now you can hear me live. So how do we do, guys? What's the feedback? Tell me what do you guys think?
I thought it was really good. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really nice way of showing the content, showing what you've got in store, what your plan is. Yeah, well received.
Great. Yeah, I think there's something about just being there, making those transitions, and being more comfortable with what you're trying to say in the spot. So it felt a little comfortable. And I gotta remember that we're still live on YouTube. Did we get any questions in the YouTube, Colleen? Did you see anything come through? I didn't see anything.
No, just basically sound issues.
Oh, what was the complaint on sound?
Oh, just we're all kind of new and learning this. So I think in the end, I think we're okay. But I wasn't maybe. I had an issue with that on my end that caused me a little delay with responding, because when I tried to have two windows open, my thing wasn't sure what to do. So that was a learning lesson for me. So thanks everyone for bearing with me on that.
I didn't start the.
What's up, Sally?
I didn't start the link when you guys all started. So then all of a sudden I saw that you were talking, and then I was like sitting there and I was like, oh no, I'm missing everything. And then I finally got the link that Colleen gave me. And then I was like behind you guys. So it played, and then I would start watching you talk again. And I was like, oh no, I'm missing something. And then the video would go ahead. But so that was kind of confusing, but I'm happy I'm caught up now. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's why this was practice, and it's going to take some time to figure it out. But I think that's what we'll do, is that we'll plan on having some kind of like 10-minute presentation at the beginning of the show, and then we'll come into just a regular meetup type thing, where we just do whatever it is we're going to do here. So actually, I was going to pull up Webflow. Do we build something? Is that what we're going to do here? I did promise building a simple website, right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
How dare I? Let me figure out how to do this. Should I share screen? Let's do this here. Let me go to Zoom. Hang on, I got to move a couple things around because of the way the stream is set up. So let me move this over here. Any specific questions? What are you guys working on? What should we jump into here that will provide the most value to you all?
So go ahead, Sally. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I'm just listening. I was yelling at the cat.
Oh, okay. I can relate to that. So we've got Nigel had posted in the chat that he had a beginner's perspective. Webflow is attractive because it's a flexible CMS. Have used Wix. It is so limiting. But Webflow has a barrier to entry because getting past the beginner status can be difficult. Many videos on YouTube are out of date. Okay. And far too long. Spending too much time on fine tuning as each element is added instead of building a rough website with entities added and doing the nest later.
The question I would ask is what's the current workflow? Is it working straight into Webflow?
Nigel, are you able to I'm not sure, are you somewhere where you can unmute yourself or else answer that question in the chat?
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Nigel.
Hi. Yeah, so I find the best way of learning for me, and it's not true for everybody, but for me, I really enjoy like a sort of like a guided, so someone building something that I can follow along with. And I've done it on a few, and I found the problem, well, as I've said, is that, so you can look at these amazing videos on the Webflow site, the Webflow University, but the problem is that you can't learn a language by looking at the dictionary, and neither can you learn it by looking at sort of, text in front of you. What works well is if you can have a bit of a guided tour comprehension of someone building a website, a simple website with the elements on it and up to date. So too many of the videos are talking about are not using the grid or the the other things that are new, and they're using the old thing, and then they spend half their time turning the old into the new. You put a section in or a container, and then they say, oh, now we're going to turn it into a div, and you sort of think, well, what's the point of that? So it's but
Great. I don't know if you.
I am sticking with it because I want the CMS, and I don't want the frustration of what I found last time with Wix, where you learn it in about 10 minutes, and then after that it's just total frustration because you can't do you have no flexibility.
Joseph, you were going to say something there. What were
Yeah,
your
I was
thoughts
gonna
here before I jump in?
I mean, there surely must be some videos out there from someone that's
So
doing
it's
doing stuff like that.
but
I don't know if you
I am sticking with it because I want the CMS, and I don't want the frustration of what I found last time with Wix, where you
decent tutorials.
you learn
Have
it in
you
about
checked
10
out
minutes, and then
any of
after that
them,
it's just
Nigel?
total frustration because you can't do. I would say Nelson. Well, he for me, he suffers from too much faffing about with each element, trying to get each element perfect and all the text. So I know how to, get text the right, the right point size, and I know to, get it bold and do stuff like that. What I would like to do is just understand how the page is built up in totality, from a simple starting point, because that to me is the barrier. And what I found very useful in workflow is that I have on one of my workflows, I have a grid, and in each grid I practice an element that I've just learned. So putting in some text.
Well, let's just.
I can't do the whole thing yet because I can't sit there for 2 hours. The attention of someone to sit there for 2 hours while they go through all this stuff. I've never got to the end yet. You know what I mean? I've sort of dropped off.
Okay.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? Can you guys see? Maybe you can't. Let me do this. Can you see my screen? Let me share. I'm going to share, let's see, Chrome with Webflow. Where's that? This one. Share. All right, so Nigel, I'm just going to start with a blank canvas here. We're going to open this thing up, and we'll call this Simple Website. Who's clicky-clacky keyboard?
Oh, that must be me.
You got one of them Gaber keyboards? Colleen,
yeah,
does it have rainbow lights?
We're a mechanical keyboard house from the IBM era, from the 1980s. So that is good feedback for next time. I will switch that.
Okay, so hey Nigel, talk to me about what kind of website or what kind of specific thing do you trying to build? Let's see if we can help you understand some of what's going on here.
Well, it's the sort of website that I want to build is I'm part of a group that looks after wants to do more with a local forest. So it's be able to have a gallery of some nice pictures of the forest, be able to have a blog with some entries on it, being able to fairly simple stuff, I would say, well within what Webflow is capable of.
Well, sure, I understand that, but okay, so let's just walk through my process here. I start with a clean canvas, right? The best thing to back into some of this stuff, even though I don't do it, I don't use any of this, is to start playing with some of these layouts, because it gives you the opportunity to just drag elements into the page and see how these sections are built, and so you can see the containers and you can see the elements and you can kind of dissect the different components inside of here. Nigel, you had said something about a grid. Was there a specific layout you were trying to build? As you talk to me, I'm just going to slap together some of the elements here and see kind of what we can come up with while you chat.
Well, it was more to do with I don't know what elements I will want to use to build a website yet, but what I want to do is understand how each element works. Because I want to understand how a grid works, understand how this element works or that element works, and then I may not use all of them in a website. But until I know what each of them does,
Nigel, what is your experience with HTML and CSS? Do you have any knowledge on that at all?
Yes, I have done some courses on it. Yeah. But I've never used them in anger, and I don't think I ever would, because it's everything I've seen is it's not maintainable for me. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna. It's a part-time activity.
So I'm just trying to understand your question here. Is it you want to understand what the elements actually do? So, for instance, what you would use a div for, what you would use a section for, why would you use a certain position, relative, absolute, overflow, hidden? Like, are you want to understand some more of the smaller mechanics of these elements and why you would put things together to build certain things? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think you got it pretty much in what you just said. It's exploring a single area, perhaps in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
And so it's like a guided tutorial on an element.
It's core
type.
structure. It's core structure what you're trying to understand, I think.
Yeah, you're looking for some of the site structure, and not just that, but maybe even some of the CSS positioning properties. And so maybe I can walk through some of that as this is created. And let me change some of those properties and explain what's happening so you can kind of see what's going on, right? So the two biggest things you're going to think about are the positioning and what styles. So you're going to be working either with a flex box or a grid in most instances to create some of these layouts. And so what you'll see here is if you have if I change this to block, I've just got essentially a square grid. It's going to try to nest the content that's inside of here. So you see I have a div block here, and then I've got this hero image mask, and this probably has some padding here, which if you can tell, it's pushing it outside of this flex container. But it's because it's not flexed. And so if you have a display block element, it's just a grid. It's just going to give you a block, and everything's going to basically line up from top to bottom. If you give it a flex container, what it's going to do is it's going to start letting that stuff slide over, right? And so it's going to put the stuff kind of either horizontally, or if you want, you can go back to that same vertical layout, but now you can center things, right? So you see your alignment properties. I can line things to the right or to the left. And in this instance, it's not going to make a lot of difference because the way that the text is set up. But in that context, let's go back to that flex container, go back to horizontal. And let's make the alignment center again. So you see how I'm clicking, Nigel, on this alignment, and it's moving. When I align to the top, it moves this element to the top of this square, right? And if I were to click to the bottom, so now we've got some alignment there, but I'm also dealing with an element inside of here, right? So this div could potentially have, let's see, let's set this to relative. It's parent container. Relative here. So when you get into like nesting items inside of each other, right, you essentially have a data structure that has to be relevant or related to its parent container. And so if I have containers and they're all just in this static setup in here, basically they don't inherit or they don't take any information. They're not related in any way to their parent containers. And so when I come in here, if I come in and I set this position from static to relative, what that does is it tells the container inside of it to be relative to that, to take an inherited principles from that container. So now if I come into this div block and I set this thing to, let's say I want to move it, I don't know why I would, but let's say I just want to make this fixed in the bottom left corner of the page of that element. It actually won't do that because the major container of the hero is probably relative. Let's do this. Relative, and stick it to the bottom. It went behind it.
C index.
Yep. It went behind it here. Where did it go? I think it disappeared. I don't know. Go back.
Maybe build out a couple of dummy sections.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do here. But I'm using Webflow's pre-built containers, and I'm not familiar with these.
I wouldn't even use that. I would just go like how you would do it.
Yep, how I would do it. So typically when I come in here, I'm going to set up a container and I'll just throw in a div. I don't use any of their containers. I don't use any of their pre-built components, to be honest. It's the best way to work. The pre-built containers start introducing some external styling components, and you just don't want to have to deal with that moving forward. And a lot of times I don't do a whole lot of anything with this unless I want to set something inside of it. So maybe I'm going to set a heading inside of here. Oh, div block, Control E, heading. All right, now I'm gonna add, what else? Let's put an image in here. Let's rebuild that little component that I was just actually looking at. Command E, text block. And does everybody use that Finder? Once you start, no, you don't use it. Why not? What's the
I need to be moving. I need to be making moves.
What do you mean by that? So,
well, like just I like to be moving around, doing things. I don't want to be typing.
Yeah.
Nah.
Okay. I hear that. All right. So, Nigel, just let me explain what I just did in that little couple steps here, right? So let me unflex this thing.
Okay. I didn't mean to sort of divert everyone down my own particular learning sort of.
Yeah, but that's what this is for, and there's not a whole lot of people here hanging out, so we might as well give you a little customized little tutorial here.
But the thing you just went through kind of encapsulates what I think I was trying to say, which is there's 1,000 things you can do, but for a beginner, this is what you should do. Do A, B, C, D, E. How many steps does it take before you just get a simple website with a few sliders and a few this, that, and the other? You've taken a slice through it that's a kind of sensible slice. And the thing you were talking about with the containers and the sections is part of the confusion, I think. That I can understand how Webflow's evolved, that certain things were key at the start, but they've now been kind of superseded by other things that are more flexible and more up to date. And therefore I don't need to use components X, Y, and Z. I'd be better off just sticking with, here's a subset of components that I can use that are sensible.
So I mean, Raymar, I could quickly run through something.
Yeah, feel free to jump in here. I'm just kind of stumbling through positioning some shit, but yeah, let me do this. Go here. Maybe you have something pre-built. Yeah, jump in or start working on something. Let's see. Happy to email. Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead and share your screen. Jump in. You're running.
Let me.
It's your show.
It's not my show. It's your show. But
well, it's your show from here moving forward.
Right. Well, so I'll just kind of reiterate what Raymar was talking about. So the main kind of process that I go to if I'm building is obviously starting off with a section. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a header. So this is just a div, and we're going to give this a class of header. Yeah. Then normal positioning to make sure that this is responsive. We're going to use the width and height. So the width is going to be 100%. So we want to make sure that div is always 100% of that screen. So when we bring the screen size down, it stays in situ. Then the height, again, that can be dependent on what height you want it to be. So say for instance, we want it to be 500 pixels. So that's basically our header space. And then what we can do with this, we can give it a background color like that. And then basically we want to look at the elements inside of here. So I don't know, prime thing would be like a title and some copy and maybe a button. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I normally do is I would drop a div in, and this div is going to be, I call it a parent. So it's a parent of that content that's going to be on side of that header. Now, the reason you wouldn't want to bring on each individual element and then start positioning them is because then you're going to have CSS for each individual element. So what I would do is do I call it a content parent. Yeah. So I call this content parent. I need to make sure that this header parent actually is on relative. Now, the reason why I want that on relative, going back to Raymar's point, anything that is set to relative, when you put something inside of it, is relative to that element. So if I start moving that element inside around, it will be bound to that parent element. If I bring it outside, it will actually be relevant to the page. So that's quite important on positioning and relative. And then you would do absolute position. So this div here, which is sitting inside of this header, is going to be on absolute. Now, when you set that to absolute, you have some controls of how you can position that box. So say, for instance, I want the copy to sit down in this bottom corner. I'm going to select that content parent, and all I'm going to do is just put bottom left. And now that has moved right to the bottom. And I'd probably, do 40 pixels here on the bottom position and 40 pixels on the left. I would go in, I'd probably drop in a header, and then I would drop in a bit of text, and I'd move that back down, and I would just give these a name. So H1, and I'd probably change that to white, and the same on that as well. Just call this, I'm just going to call it anything at the moment. Boom. So there's your header. And now, for instance, if you wanted to further position this, you only have to position this one element. So now I can just move this element. Is this something that you would do, Raymar? Is this something similar?
Yeah, if I was using, it depends on how I guess I was going to approach the, what I was trying to do with the box. I don't use absolute unless it's going to be like a standalone element. So if I was doing something like that, it would just depend on if there were other things inside of that space. But yeah, that's the way.
That's one way. And again, like you
could
said,
do the same
Nigel,
thing with padding and marging. So maybe you show them how to do it with padding and marging.
So I get rid of that. Now
I'll do
it's
it
on
Flexbox.
Yeah, and then I would do it on Flex. So Flex is probably what I would normally use. And that was just one way of showing you. So Flex, I want it to be center inside of here. And then all I need to do with this is I just need to go to the header, and I can just put some padding on this side and go like that. And now I positioned it like that. Or say, for instance, I want to bring it down. I can just bring it down like that and put some padding like that. So that's just showing you two ways how to execute exactly the same thing. So Raymar, was probably right. The way that Raymar said with the flex box is probably the right way. I wanted to show you another way, but that is another way, depending if you wanted to position other elements. And prime example for that.
Why don't you talk a little bit about why you would use two different, because Flexbox and having everything inside of a single container without being positioned absolute or fixed kind of leaves things in their natural flow, right? So Nigel, so when something is just relative or static, it's basically just in its order that it's in the column of your layers. But once you put something absolute or fix it to a position, you're kind of telling it to look at where its parent container is and then be absolutely positioned relative to that element. So then it comes out of the flow, the basic flow of your layers there, and like Barry just showed you, or Joseph just showed you, it allows it to come, and then you can position it manually. And so a lot of times for like, if you wanted to do background, let's say text, and so you wanted to have content over top and maybe a hero background behind that, that's maybe at a 30% opacity with like a, some cool design effect, you might position the background absolute, and you might have the actual heading itself flexed above that. Could you slap something behind that, Joseph, to show kind of like just double that heading and put something absolute big and blown out on the bottom, just the same heading even, to show kind of what I mean about the absolute positioning there?
What on that, drop that into here?
Yeah, just imagine it's got like a mirrored, duplicated behind it at like 300% of its existing shape, but and then just blow it out.
Absolute, and then what, make it bigger?
Yeah, just make it huge, give it like a 20% opacity and stick it in the bottom just to show how like you can layer stuff or
gotcha. So I know what you're saying. So all I've done there is just created I've just duplicated this content parent. So simplest way, I'll just redo that, Apple C, Apple V, or Control C, Control V on a PC. I'm just going to get rid of this. What I'm going to have to do is just change the class of this, because if I actually, the class is here, so I've given this the class of H1. If I actually go and change that, it's going to change both. So basics, just give it another class. I don't know, it might be H1 main. And then now I've actually got a class in that folder. So I'll just call it something random. And then I can make this one bigger, which is great. That's what I want. And then I'm going to give this another class so I can make this absolute. And then what I can do is make that absolute. And as you can see, that other element has fallen back into its place. And then like Raymar said, if I wanted to, I don't know, change this, see now we're starting to create some layering. So as you can see here, we have text underneath. And then there's a few things that you probably want to look at. So this content parent main thing is going to be Z index. Simplest way to think about z-index is just the layering of them elements. That's the simplest way. So 0 is the bottom, 99999 is the very top. So on this one, you probably want to go to 0. And then on this one, you know, you might want to set it to relative, so you know that it's above, I think, and then you could probably put it on 1. And the only reason for that is if you do start layering up a lot of things, you need to think about that logical layering just in case, because you might get, say, for instance, I've had where I've layered something over and it's actually overlaying the button and I can't click the button. And that is just to do with the z-index. So that's, again, something to look at.
Yeah.
Okay,
what if we go ahead,
good.
Nigel?
Thanks. Yeah. So, I think that what that says to me is that what I need to go away and look at is to take an example like you, see if I can get an example like that working on my own system, and then be able to just play around with it. You know, having got the basics there, because it's not immediately apparent to the newcomer what all those things mean. If you've got lots of experience with CSS, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, well in CSS I'd write it this way, and in Webflow it's that control there, and you know, the index or whatever it is.
Hi.
But it's not immediately apparent to the newcomer.
Yeah, I agree. Hello, Gennaro. We got somebody else joined us from the YouTube stream, joined to the Zoom call, so welcome. I agree, Nigel. It is very challenging if you're coming into the space from...
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. It's challenging if you're coming to the space without any real CSS background, because having to know how the things affect each other.
I know CSS, HTML, JavaScript. Sorry for my bad English.
No.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We were talking to Nigel, Gennaro.
Oh, sorry.
I was like, wait, you just said.
I'm Italian. I'm a funny, happy pizza, pasta, mandolin.
It's okay. Wow, yeah. Did you bring anything to share? I could use some pizza, pasta, wine. What do you got? Just keep the coronavirus to yourself.
About 2 weeks ago, I discovered Webflow. Before I'm a WordPress developer, web designer, but you know, WordPress is not the best tool. And I'm trying to move to Webflow, but I'm having some trouble with not with the editor and designer, but with the CMS. Because with WordPress, with the plugins and more, I can add more functions. But I'm working on a e-learning platform. But I wanted to create a learning platform on Webflow, but there is not an user support in Webflow. Maybe you can, I don't know, you maybe know any solutions for creating something like that.
We could show you some CMS setup. I don't think we have time to get into a member stack install, to be honest. We could do that like in a future show or something. We'll take a note and do that.
But not now. Maybe
about
you
the
can
CMS
just
though. So could you explain what you're trying to do with the CMS, and maybe we could build a collection for you on the show here, and you know, kind of answer some of that.
Okay. No.
Colleen.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Gennaro. There's am I pronouncing your name right, Gennaro?
Thanks for Naples. I'm from Naples.
Oh yes, Naples as well. So a couple of us are used to do WordPress and have moved over to Webflow. So we can understand that transition. And I will say I have loved the transition over to the Webflow CMS. So shoot what your questions are, and let's get you set up.
Yeah.
No, my question is about the user. So how Webflow don't integrate a user account, a user. How I can manage?
Login areas and stuff like that.
Users in Webflow.
Member stack. Member stack.
Yeah.
Member stack. Okay.
That's what I was saying, is that I don't know that we have the time to go into a member stack install. But they do have it. That would be the best solution, I think, with Webflow, is a member stack. And it takes, I think the first time I ever installed it, it took me 20 minutes, and that included the time to like watch the videos to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy. You just add a couple attributes to your HTML. It might take a little longer to configure the accounts properly and get it set up, but to actually have, so you can have a login membership section is pretty simple to get to. Then it takes time to just kind of customize and build out from there. You know who's got a really good class on that?
Yeah, I have already watched the member stack video.
Have
But
you
my question,
seen Mackenzie's class, Mackenzie Child's class on that?
yeah, I don't remember, but I've watched some member stack video on their homepage, tutorials and more.
Yeah,
But my question,
go to nocode.video and check out in the tutorial section. I just
Yeah.
posted some, there's a guy named Mackenzie Child. He's got a 7-course, it's super dead simple walkthrough for how to add a membership site to your Webflow site. Memberships, let me see. I'll give you the exact URL. I'll share it in the link. Let's see, tutorial.
Mackenzie Child, okay.
Yep.
I'm on the page.
Yeah. There's a 7-stage tutorial there, starting with how to build a member stack site using Webflow, Zapier, and Airtable. I watched it the other day. It's super good. Everything's really easy to follow. It's very well executed. Joseph, you might actually want to look at this for how you're thinking about structuring your instructional stuff. It's just a really good format.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to likely need some place to house these videos. So yeah, it probably will be a member stack job.
Right. Yeah. So, did you have a specific question that you wanted us to try to jump into?
Okay.
While we have you here?
Another question. When I want to design a new website, okay, I start from sketching Adobe XD. I design all the website, and then I move to Webflow. What should I recommend from first step? Should I try to set up the CMS or before design, or I don't know? What is the start point?
So I think that's different for everybody, but typically I start with the information architecture, and then I start with some wireframes. It's good old-fashioned sketching by hand, honestly, is where most of my websites start. So I'll take a look and I'll think about my data architecture. So am I going to have blog post? Is this going to be a recipe website? Is it going to be videos? And so then you just look at the schema and you come up with each piece from the collection and the relationship to each other. So if you have a blogs, maybe there's authors. If you have blog and authors, maybe there's categories. And so once I have that, basically the data structure, the schema of the site, I'll go into like a wireframing process where then I start laying out sections of a website. But even before that, I think through the content. So ideally you'd have the content from a content team or in your own head of what you're trying to create, whether it's some copy or some images or just some starting place to have an idea of what you're going to lay out on the page. And so once I have my data structure set up and the content that I want to lay out, I really just start sketching various layouts or looking for inspiration. Oftentimes, I'll create a little bit of a mood board that will give me some inspiration sites that I'm looking for design inspiration or functionality. And from there, I kind of block out a few pages in a wireframe and jump right into Webflow and kind of build out the chunks of it, typically starting with the styled components and working backwards from there into kind of the detail of the sections, following the wireframe. And we could go into a lot more detail than that if you have any specific questions about any of those parts of the process. And if anybody else wants to chime in, I'd love to hear about your process too.
Okay. Now the part where I'm having the much problems and trouble is the ideal part. Before I start working with Webflow, I have trouble trying to design the website. Like I don't know what is better, what are the new styles, or maybe where I can find some inspiration or other websites like. In this part I'm having trouble because in
I got a good one for you.
Send it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess with what you're saying, the best place is always to have a reference. I think what Raymar said is kind of getting that inspiration first is really important, and using a reference. Now, there's two ways of using a reference. One way is ripping it off. I don't know if Raymar, did you see that guy that copied my site?
I did very poorly at that, but yeah, I did see that.
I know. So yeah, I've been victim to that, but yeah. So obviously you've got a reference, and a reference is really important, and it could just be anything. It could just come down to, you know, the color palette that you like from that reference, or it could be the typography used by that reference. Thinking about websites is about, I call it, again, little bits. What you're going to get from the course that I'm going to be doing is the 5 key building blocks. And these are the 5 key building blocks that I, you know, pretty much every piece of design, even all the way through to the graphics, typography, color, layout, imagery, and white space. And these are things that I think over time, it's going to take you time to get past that barrier. There's always a barrier of everything where you have to get to that level to understand how you put these elements together. But looking at them and getting references and using that as a base where you can interpret that in your own way is a really good way to start to have some direction. And it doesn't mean that you need to try and like do things completely different, but start to use references so you can understand how to put these elements together. And then when you start to learn that, you'll be able to do it without having too many references where you're actually following something. Instead, you're looking at micro elements, which would be fonts, colors, and then you're taking that and then you're going, this is my vision from that small interpretation. But it's a time thing. It's you know, 10 plus years, me, easy. And I'm still learning and developing and trying to improve all of these small little, you know, these details that really make a difference. And that would be where I would start. It would be just finding a kind of a North Star, taking that reference, interpret it as best as you can. Yes, it might be a little bit copying or feel like it's a bit copying, but as long as you can add your own flavor and own touch and evolve it in a certain way, then, you know, you've done, you know, a half decent job to get it in the place that you want it to be.
Yeah, and I think that's a key there is kind of learning how to steal properly. You know, every creative kind of steals from wherever they can get
It's
content
plagiarism.
or whatever.
Design, any creative is the biggest form of plagiarism ever. There's no really original ideas, no more.
It's just about how you steal, though, right? It's about stealing the inspiration or stealing a little
quote.
element. Yeah, it's not. Don't take the whole thing, damn it.
So I'll show you. So Raymar, with my course, I'll just quickly share my screen and I'll give you a prime example of what I'm talking about. So this is just to show you, right? Okay, so this is my working space. Look at that. It's an absolute mess, right? And this is me just playing around with ideas. But look at where I got my inspiration from.
Okay.
It's an illustration, right? I found, you know, I love this color palette. And then I was like 80s vibe. Oh, I'm getting an 80s vibe. And then as you can see here, as I start to explore and I'm putting things together, I'm like, nah, not really getting there. So I start evolving. I'm like playing around. And as you can see, it just starts to gently progress into something that absolutely looks nothing like this. As you can see, I'm starting to build out. Look how I've just evolved into this direction that I've created, which is, if you look at the two side by side, you know, there's the only resemblance that I'm keeping is probably the color palette. But how I've transitioned from that small piece of inspiration, which, you know, look, there's no other inspiration. There's no layout inspiration. There's no other inspiration apart from that. And that's because I've got to that level where I can take a small thing like that and then evolve. Where with maybe the process you'd probably need to introduce is feeding yourself a little bit more. So then when you go down to actually get into it, you've got more room to go through that process. So that's just a little kind of flavor of how I put things together. And it's, You know, as you can see, it's just, you know, try things, variation. And I know some people like to work straight into Webflow, and I get that. I always find when I go into Webflow straight away and I start doing them things, I just get lost and I start doing loads of crazy shit. So it's like, you know, look, I'm just trying all sorts of randomness, you know, and exploring different layout options. Is that one look better than that one? You know, is that one better than that one? And then actually I was like, no, this is the layout that I think looks good. And then as I'm doing that, I'm then coming up with ideas of how that's going to animate. So that's why I think that phase is so important. And Raymar does his with sketching, or someone might do it, I don't know, with just jotting down some notes. But I feel like there needs to be a little bit more visual cue for you to be able to step into Webflow. I mean, that's just my own personal reference.
Yeah, I think
everyone does it different, but it's just a nice. I mean, for me, it's what I'm going to show in the course is just a perfect example of how you take inspiration, and it will probably inspire people to look at things a little bit differently than just looking at a website. And then what you land up creating is another website that we've all seen before. And that's something that I'm kind of anti. I want to push websites for what they can be, not for what someone else has done. Boring, seen it. Come on, let's push. This is what Webflow can, you know, really do. And you know, it can do anything as long as you set yourself up for it. You know, you're good. You're really good.
That's really neat to see. And I liked your comparison about the North Star. And did I see in the middle there, it looked like there was a rectangle with a triangle with a circle that kind of looks like your YouTube, as I recall, your YouTube icon. So did that somehow inform your
kind of. Again, and I mean, I guess some other little kind of talking points for me really is consistency. So one that runs through with everything that I do, but that comes down again to the elements that you're putting on the page. So it's all about consistency of spacing, consistency of sizing, looking at the consistency of the proportions. And these are the things that I would pick up probably on every day on an average designer, because I think, again, it's just that time thing where I'm looking at how things are spaced, how things flow, how things sit together. And I think that's another kind of piece to that puzzle, is having that consistency. Like, prime example would be like, don't have 10 or 12 different font sizes, because it's just too many, right? Don't have uppercase, lowercase, bold, thick, thin, too many fonts. You know, font pairing combinations, maybe a serif with a sans serif always is a good combination. Or is it looking at, you know, how you break them fonts down, and the colors, don't have 25 colors. Think about the color palette. You know, them little micro consistencies are like, they will push your level of design from there to there automatically, because design can be simple, really simple, but it's them little small things that you don't notice, that everyone would go, that's out, that's not right, why is that aligned, what's the reason why you've got that there, why did you put that there? It's kind of a jigsaw puzzle that you're putting together, and you've got to have logical reasons for why you might put somewhere something. And so they're just kind of how I, you know, think about things. And hopefully that, you know, that's...
Hey Joseph, where's your background? You said years of design. Were you always in web and interactive? Did you do any print? Do you have formal training in this space? What's your background?
So yeah, I've always been on the digital sector, although I have worked a lot in I started in fashion, actually, e-com. So I was doing like kind of emails, banners, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, pretty boring kind of creative. But I did traditional, did a bit of print, did a bit of comms. So I've dabbled in a little bit. I love branding. I think brand going into digital is so killer and so crucial. Getting again consistency for them to sit together. If you get that down, you're onto some gold dust. But lots of digital stuff. Worked in lots of different agencies, mainly working across product, websites, anything in the digital space. and yeah, that's kind of where I am now and what I'm doing. Yeah.
Did anybody in the crowd here that's listening, do you have any other questions as it relates to like web stuff? Or I see Gennaro's got his hand up. What do you got? You got another question for us, or?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first
Okay.
is, how can I integrate 3D elements in Webflow? I've seen the tutorial, but it's a video. But a video, yeah, you can integrate a Lottie file video. But I want to integrate a real OBJ. You know how to do that? Or is possible? Maybe
Yeah,
you
with like
don't.
some WebGL stuff, or you need some JavaScript. It's not something
Okay.
that's native to Webflow.
Okay.
So you can do it. Who does? What's the guy who's always releasing these clonables? I'm trying to think. There's somebody in the Webflow showcase that's always releasing these interesting little JavaScript thingies, clonables with like all sorts of little interactions and page transforms and things like that.
Yeah, I know that. It's CJ Hurst.
Yeah, yep. Him, and then let's see who else. What was the other question while we try to find?
Okay, the other question is a more practical question. Is maybe it's a funny question, but how do you charge for our work?
Oh,
I know.
That's a loaded question, yeah.
Oh, that's a question that always normally gets me a bit riled up.
Okay, no, maybe in Italy there is a really bad situation for web designer in general. Clients don't give value for our work.
Do you know what? Raymar? I think. Do you know Joe Finsweet?
Yeah.
You know that video that you played of him and what he said. Yeah, if you want to charge clients 10 grand sites, you need to be making 10 grand sites.
Yeah, I know.
For me, the way that I would value yourself and your work is one, depending on your experience. Two, depending on the value of what you can bring, not just to the client, but how you can guide your client as well. There's a little bit more of a business and strategy side that you could provide as a service. But again, that's only going to come with time and experience. And the level of your work, the quality of your work it's the final output with the craft. Yes, there's always the value of what you're bringing to the client. And I've heard some stupid things said by some stupid people saying, well, I'm building them a website, I'm going to make them loads of money. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that in real life. There's, marketing, and there's SEO, and there's lots of other things that need to be in position for that site to work well, to get eyeballs on it, basically. So, yeah, what's your view on it, Ray?
So Jason in the YouTube chat is saying it's about picking the right clients as well, which I agree. A lot of times, if people don't understand the value that you bring, because I agree, you can't tell somebody if they're going to do $1 million of revenue next year, you can't be like, well, I deserve 10% of that because I'm going to build your website. In certain instances, maybe you could make that case. But as a general rule of thumb, that you're just entitled to a certain percentage of revenue because that's the value you bring, I'm not sure that's like a equation that you can stick to.
Or the other one that I was going to say, or the other one is the one that I hear a lot is, oh, well, I charge this much for this page, so you can charge that much.
Yeah.
So, come on.
So when I started, what I would do is I would estimate kind of how long it would take me to build a section, and I would think about the hours, and I would think about what I wanted to earn per hour, and I would try to back into what I thought I should be charging for the work.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of get better at understanding, okay, can I add 20% of that? Can I add 100% of that? Do I need to remove some? Because maybe you put it together and you think, holy shit, they'll never take this, But sometimes you should maybe throw that high offer at them because, don't knock yourself down in price. And a lot of time it's about setting the expectation and managing those expectations all the way through the process. So I talk to people, and if you come in, let's say you have two situations, right? Clients coming in for a website and they go chat with you and you meet at a Starbucks, maybe you're a little late or flustered. You're a freelancer. you know, I don't know. Maybe you don't have a contract in place, or there's nothing that feels structured, and just like, oh, whatever, this, however it happens, it happens. Versus that same person who comes and they meet with me in a beautiful studio or in a space that I've thought about everything, and I'm worried about the experience, and when I put something in front of them, it feels official, and they're like, oh, this is real. And then when we go down to the pricing, I validate everything, and I'm showing and I'm assessing all their needs, and I'm making sure that the things that I put together are regurgitating essentially what they've told me they needed. And as long as I'm doing that all the way through and building the value through that expectation, when I deliver the price, there's almost never like, you're crazy, right? It's an expectation of like, oh, this is going to be way more expensive than the other guy I was talking to. And so you got to kind of start from the beginning to build the values that you can earn. And a lot of that comes from reputation, past projects, things that you've done before.
Yeah, portfolio.
Yeah, 100%. That's it, dude. Your previous work, that's what people are going to look at. They're going to see, what have you done for them? I want some of that for me. And the better you get as making people ask that question, the more projects you're going to get.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And the more you can charge, right? Like when you start delivering projects like what FinSuite and Joseph are delivering, you can charge whatever you want because nobody else can build it, right? Like you're just in a class that nobody else can recreate because it's not following some templated or formal design process. It's coming out as a work product of this really creative brain, And that takes time to build those processes, to kind of figure out how that works.
I think just to add on to that, I mean, a good thing just to recap on what Raymar said is his prime example of what I do. I have my hourly rate, and I would look at a project and I would go, right, how many days is that going to take me? And I'm like, okay, if I spent that amount of time, it's going to cost me 2 weeks. All right, let's give or take maybe changes, fixes, thinking about things, maybe some hiccups, always factor that in. And then I would sometimes present a price range. So I would go, you're looking at between 45 to 55 hours of this. Again, be careful. Sometimes, do you need to tell the client that you're doing them many hours? Maybe keep that closed because it's better just to give them a price. Because if they go 45 hours, Jesus. But that's how you work it out in your head. You work that out and you go 45, you work out your rate, you go, okay, let's do a bracket. And then you can do what Raymar said, you can pitch a little bit higher, but then you can also keep a safety net in there as well. So they can go, all right, I'm not so sure about the top end, but I'm keen on the bottom end or the middle end. And then you can then just adjust how much effort and time you put into it. And that's the way I would value it. Time and effort. That is it. Time and effort.
And to build off of that just a little bit further, you can always remove services when somebody wants to go down, right? So if you leave yourself that bottom and somebody wants to start pushing you lower, you start taking things away from them, right? So if they've got that expectation built and they're looking for the magic that you bring to the table, and you start saying, well, okay, but maybe we'll just do one custom animation instead of 2, or we'll do 1-page template instead of 3, or 2-page templates instead of 3, whatever it is, right? Now they're starting, well, oh, okay, well, maybe we could do the extra $500, or maybe we could do the extra $1,000 or whatever it is, right? And so that's just a common negotiation tactic, is that if you find yourself in a position and somebody wants to lower the price, cool, we can lower the price. We just got to lower the scope of work. And as soon as you offer that to them, they're like, well, I need this. Okay, well, you need to pay that.
And then if they go, then they weren't a client that was worth taking on anyway.
Yeah, simple. A lot of times, one of the things that I've had in my experience, and I've got quite a bit of sales experience actually before I got into the web game, that was my background. But typically when somebody pays what you ask, or they're happier with the end product. The people who are going to beat you down on the price or try to get it for as cheap as possible, you're never going to make them happy anyway. And those, more often than not, become miserable projects that just drag on forever. And maybe in the early stage in your career, you have to take those projects just to get by. But as soon as you can start climbing out of the ranks where you just don't need to take every project that comes, that's when you start getting to a position where you can negotiate with a little bit more leverage and kind of try some of those tactics where you're kind of playing back and forth with the people, and you're figuring out what, you got to know what value you bring. And, maybe the problem is that you're not going after clients who are looking in that same value scale, right? If it's a small business on the corner, they're probably not going to spend ever $10,000, $20,000 on a website, right? So if that's who you're marketing to, odds are you're not going to sell that website. But if you're selling to organizations that already know, hey, if I spend on a new website, it's going to be in this tier. Now you don't even have to overcome the hurdle of trying to get into that, price point.
Okay.
It still takes time though.
Yeah. There's no shortcut to any of that. 100%. Yeah.
Just like what I said earlier, eat, breathe, sleep this stuff. If you really, really do want to make a living out of it, you just have got to be like a sponge, to be honest, and just go for it and be committed.
Yeah.
It's a bit like anything. If you want to succeed, you've just got to. I wanted to be a superstar DJ, but that never happened. So I was like, well, shit, I better become a web designer. Well, but it's something that I've always wanted to do. So I had two good options, didn't I? Really, I was like.
So did we just add an element here? Joseph will be DJing, and we'll throw some beats on, and then we'll like build in the background, and we'll just like have like a, it's like some kind of EDM Webflow party.
I'm not sure about EDM, but
I don't know.
We call it techno or house over here.
Techno house.
Same
Okay.
with
I don't know, dude. I don't know anything about that.
Durano will be in tune with me. I presume he's Italian. They like a bit of techno and house.
Sorry, I don't understand. Please, can you repeat?
Techno and house.
Does anyone have? Oh, Jason coming in from YouTube with trust, he says. And I think going back to the client conversation, that's one of the biggest keys is if you can build trust with a client, that's worth a lot of money. If a client knows they can depend on you to get a project done or deliver what you say you're going to deliver, that's worth a lot more than somebody who might be less expensive, who doesn't deliver or who that they can't trust. And so that's a good point. Thanks for sharing that, Jason. I like the idea, Barry. Why do I keep wanting to call you Barry? Joseph.
Just call me Barry, because a lot of people do call me Barry.
Okay.
Call me Barry, man.
Yeah.
Okay, Joseph.
No, Barry.
James Provato. I think there are several types of web designers, some that build the tool of a website and some that build a message and a functional tool to fulfill a client's needs. Boom. Damn, you can't say that a whole lot better, right? So a lot of people have commoditized the process of building websites, and it's just become a thing that anyone can do, right? Any so-and-so can go slap a WordPress template or a Wix or a blah, blah, whatever, and it's just, yeah, I need a website. And so what James is saying here is that, your real goal is to go talk to the client, figure out what their pain point is, and solve that with the technology or with the website. And the more you find yourself doing that, again, the more you can charge, and the more you can, get people excited about paying you big bucks for these projects. All right. What do you guys think? What do you guys think we should do next? I would like to do some speed building. What do you think, Joseph? If we did something like this, where everyone was kind of sharing or feeding their screen, and maybe we could have some music or some color commentary, if you will, going on in the background, and we're just bouncing around to all the different people building. So we have like a 10-minute challenge or a 30-minute challenge, or then like a, just various things, and say, okay, everyone's got to build. We'll come up with some prizes, and I think it'd be fun, interactive.
Isn't there a way to share to have multiple people working on a Webflow?
Not right now in the same project at the same time. I think that's something that they're working on actively right now. I don't know when they will release that.
That'd be nuts.
Yeah.
So
if you see inside of the designer sometimes, on the bottom right next to the styles panel, sometimes you'll see a little profile picture, and you'll see like a picture of yourself, and it's Webflow playing with multi-users. And so think of like document sharing, or like a Google Docs where you see multiple profiles. So I would imagine that at some point, from a enterprise level standpoint, it would be really helpful for them to be able to have multiple people inside of the project at once. So maybe not on the same page, because that'd be impossible, I think. But yeah, inside the project for sure. Who knows what they're doing? They work magic, so.
So I put a note in the chat on a topic for future session might include how to manage improvements and changes on a live Webflow. That's something I don't understand. If you've got a live system, how do you, get the next generation of that website? If you have a prototype website to start with, and then you want to build a more sophisticated version, perhaps you start without CMS, and then later you want to add CMS, or you want to, have a more sophisticated header page. How do you, get your next one ready in order to, how do you make the transition from version 1 to version 2?
Yeah, and that varies every time. I mean, it depends on if you're talking about a full site rebuild or if you're talking about just adding a new page or updating the styles. That is, there are some issues with Webflow in that context where, let's say I'm working on a site and I have it published to staging, or if I'm working on something in staging and a client wants to publish a new blog article to the live site, it would push my design changes live. And so those are concerns that at some point they'll have to overcome as they get into that. But that's a complicated question, Nigel.
The easiest way around that would be duplicate that page.
Correct.
And then make the changes on that empty page or the duplicated page, and then the changes that are live on that home page you just publish, and it won't publish that other page. You just give it a random name so no one can find it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I see what you're saying. Is you're building on a random. I see.
Yeah. So you just, if say for instance you was making updates to the homepage, you duplicate the homepage, you make them changes on that homepage, and then if say for instance the client was like, oh, can you quickly add this blog and post it? You can post it, you can update, but it's not going to affect that homepage. And then when you go back, you just the template the duplicate you created, you just set that then to the home.
Yeah.
So you just that would be the workaround for that.
Yeah, that seems like a good way. The only thing is sometimes, and do you ever have this with interactions? Do you ever have an issue where like you need to reset the elements? You need to change the target elements or reset?
Again, that comes down to whether they're linked by a class or by element, and that's really important. Again, that's something.
Yeah, but I've had issues with that even when they are class based. When I go from page to page, sometimes I don't know if it's just a bug or what. But
yeah, it is a bug. Yeah, sometimes they do disconnect.
Right, that's what I was talking about.
And it's just a case of going in and then just resetting the target again.
Right. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? Let's see. Jason, also sometimes sites are just boring. If you design a site for an accountant, it's not going to be the most exciting as their target audience won't want it. Yeah. It depends. It definitely depends on what the audience is, what your design should look like, and what the end product will be. And okay. Anybody else got anything for us? Otherwise, I think we're close to the end here. I don't have a whole lot else to bring to the table. Anybody else got some thoughts? Something you want to share?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, I think
good
that's
in the neighborhood.
episode 1 in the bag. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thanks for watching on YouTube. If you've been watching, actually, let me do this. Let me go full screen to me. Thanks, guys, if you've been watching on YouTube, and we hope you'll join us next time. Check it out at nocode.video. We'll be updating videos on a regular basis, so stay tuned for more of that. Catch you next time, YouTube. Boom. And that.